Hello, everyone. Welcome to Real Dad Speak, a show where real dads share their stories about being present in their child's lives with the goal of raising responsible adults. I am your host, Sarah McClure, and my guest today is Justin Roth. Justin is a returning guest, and he is the owner of Shorelane's Bowling Center on Harper and 13 Mile Road in St. Clair Shores. He is a proud husband, dad, author, and has his own counseling practice. Today, I'm going to talk with Justin about the parent's role in child development and executive functioning. And Justin's going to give us the definition or the meaning of executive functioning. Welcome, Justin.
Thank you. Thanks for having me back.
My pleasure. Always want to know how we can make our children better,
Yeah.
better people, better children, and then really, really positive adults.
So
So,
there's a lot of education that goes into parenting, as you know. Some of it's through books, some of it's through hand-me-down knowledge. There's all sorts of different ways. Um, what I've learned in the counseling practice and therapy and just seeing a lot of different kids from all different types of backgrounds and learning about them is that we all have executive functioning. And what executive functioning is, it is the skills that everyone uses to organize and act on information. The skills we use to organize and act on information. So there's lots of skills that we all have as adults and even as kids. Impulse control, emotional control, flexible thinking, working memory, self-monitoring, planning and prioritizing, task initiation, and organization. Now I say all those things and it's like, okay, well, what about those things and how does that go into children and kids? Well, it goes into children, kids, and adults. It's not just one when they're little, but it's how we teach them those skills to for them to become, I guess, successful adults. That's really what executive functioning is.
okay. So, some of the things that kids learn, like when they go to preschool,
Mhm.
if they haven't already, I think they're supposed to be able to tie their shoes, say their ABCs, count, and all of that stuff. Other than that, does the preschool really help with the executive functioning, with the categorizing and the,
Yeah, so
uh,
they do. It's on a micro level. I don't know if they're necessarily, and it also depends on what kind of preschool you're going to. I would say that the beginning of executive functioning starts at home before anything, and you're doing it whether you know it or not. So, for instance, if let's say you're always late leaving home, but
mhm,
in the meantime of being late, you get frustrated and you're frantic and you're frazzled and you're screaming all over the place. Let's get this, and then the kid won't get into the car. That's them
right.
learning about time management in that moment. So,
Uh,
getting to preschool, you know, there's studies that show like that you can see anxieties in kids in the womb. By the time they're in preschool, that anxiety starts to show up, but they look at it and they call it anxiety. But it's deeper than anxiety. Anxiety is just the symptom of the problem. Now, I'm not saying that the task initiation or it's going to be, um, monitoring or time management is going to be for every kid. It's going to be different for all kids. But you start seeing those things at home. So when they get to preschool, some of those things have been developed. Things like, flexible thinking. Can they look at one thing and look at another thing and see the difference? You ever see that? There's like a famous study where they put a wide cup and a tall cup, and it's the same amount of water, but they want the tall cup because it looks like there's more. They don't have that flexible thinking yet to see that it's the same amount of water. Familiar with that?
yeah, I can
Yeah.
remember my brother's friend, his mother gave a paper dollar to her daughter and gave 4 quarters to her granddaughter.
Mhm.
And the daughter started crying. She has more than me.
Yep.
She had four to her one, and she just had a fit. And she tried to explain to her, it's a dollar. It's the same amount. And she's like, no, she's got more than
Mhm.
me. So
Yep. So that would all be considered normal, for a preschool or a little kid who doesn't understand money yet. That
right.
would be in the right time if they're in that preschool. But yes, preschool should start to get you prepared for those things. And many do in many cases. A lot of it's, they're going to call it babysitting, but the right place or a good place is going to help with, okay, we're all going to go here first, and then we're going to go here, and then we're going to go here. And while we do it, we're going to hold hands and we're going to be quiet. That's the
Right.
part that you're learning in preschool. We're going to hold hands. And when we walk through the hall, we're not going to be loud because there's other people learning.
Right.
That would be an example of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So, how do parents determine their child's weaknesses or their skills?
Yeah, that's a big one. I think that's the $1 million question. I think the reality is that no matter how educated you are or how smart you don't have control over another human being's future. You can think you're giving them all the skills and all the tools, but there's so much that goes into their personality
Mhm.
that you have no control over at all. And just even using that word control, all you're trying to
Right.
do is you're trying to manage,
Yeah.
especially if you have more than one kid. It comes down to management. So
And
um, education is a big part of it for the parent. But beyond education, it's going to be patience, a lot of patience, and however you define love. Just being able to be patient and loving that child is going to be a bigger determinant on how many books you read or how educated you are on whatever topic of child development you want. That's the experience that I've seen so far. I have a lot of parents who, send their kids in here who are PhDs. They're smart people, um,
right.
but they may not have the full understanding of how executive functioning works. And they look at it from a moral, it's a moral thing. Like, let's say that you can't be on time. They
Okay.
say, don't you respect that person's time? And the kid starts feeling that sense of shame. Meanwhile, I asked the kid, how do you define time management? What does that word mean? And they say to me, well, it means knowing like what I have to do and where I have to be. And okay, like that's a pretty good definition of it, but how do you break that down? So an example that I actually had this morning, I had a 18-year-old kid in my office, and he has a hard time getting places on time, really hard. Um, Almost, it's to the point now where he's going to like a one-on-one school because he can't make it to school on time. He gets anxious, he has panic attacks, things like that. And we start talking about it. He's like, well, I need to know where I have to be. And that's how I know like what I have to do. I said, well, what leads up to that? You wake up, take a shower, and you do 6 other things. For him, he wanted to greet the dogs. He wanted to play with the dogs for 15 minutes. And I
Oh.
said, well, you account for that. How do you know it's 15 minutes? What if it's 20 minutes that you're
Mm-hmm.
actually playing with the dogs? And then, you want to eat breakfast. You want to eat breakfast, make breakfast, um, take a shower. He said shave, clean up his, regular hygiene, and then get in the car. But then he's not accounting for traffic either. So time management goes so much deeper than just, oh, well, I know I have to be here at this time, here at that time. And then for a kid, him hearing that, he was like, oh, like I was never taught that about time. It was just, okay, be here at this time. It was an assumption that he could just do it all on his own. And the reality is that a lot of these kids, they don't do it on their own, especially because of the world we live in now. It's a very, I'm going to do this for them because it wasn't done for me, or I want to make sure that my kid doesn't
Right.
feel any sense of, pain or anything. Well, that's one of the things that could happen if that's the parenting route you're taking.
Wow.
I don't know if that
Okay.
answered that question or not, but
Yeah.
yeah, preschool is
Yeah.
important, but it starts
Well,
at home.
I had a previous guest. He told me that he has 2 girls. The older
Mhm.
one likes to do flips and somersaults and stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
And so, um, he said, I'm going to put her in gymnastics. And when he told their mom, she said, well, you got to put the younger one in there too. And he
Hmm.
said, I'm not wasting my money and my time. She doesn't do that. He's
Hmm.
been watching her. And he said the reason why he told her that was because he has either 3 or 4 other brothers.
Hmm.
Um, the mom wanted to keep them active, so she put him in football. He, of course, did not care for that.
Yep.
And he had to stay in there and be there because she wanted them all together. He had no interest in that whatsoever. And in his words, I think he said she just wasted her money and her time because he had no interest in football.
Yeah, no, good for
And
that. Good for that dad for seeing that in his daughter that she liked to flip, the other one didn't. Kids are
Right.
very different, and being together doesn't create closeness. It could do the opposite, especially if one's miserable being there.
Right. And this is what I'm thinking about, paying attention to their personalities.
Hmm.
You watch them. So do you just watch them, or is it more important that you communicate with them when they're doing, like, if you see them coloring
Hmm.
and they like a lot of pinks and reds or whatever, but they're always, or either they start drawing, do you say, um, do you think you want to, paint or something? Do you ask them if they're old enough?
Hmm.
Just how do you get them when you realize they like something? Do you get more and bigger, or do you just like wait and see what happens?
Yeah, so I think you should foster it from what I've noticed and seen, even in my own kids.
Right,
Like my son, he loves to flip and he loves to wrestle and play and jump around, and he's active too.
right.
So like I'm planning on he's in gymnastics right now, gymnastics and swimming. That's what he's in right now, and we'll transition from gymnastics to wrestling because he loves it. He can't get enough of it.
Okay.
His best friend is a girl, and she draws. She can draw all of her. She's 3 years old. She can do all of her letters. She knows her colors and differentials, and can do great shapes and all these things. My son's not at that level yet. It doesn't mean he's not going to be someday.
Right.
But I believe in fostering what you see, and then obviously, show them, give them the experience so that maybe one day they will. That's kind of what I'm hoping. I hope my son can draw and
Yeah.
do all that.
So, what do you think is the best way for a parent to communicate with your child?
Well, I think most parents need to see how they communicate with other people. Mostly, I mean, themselves and like their friends, their spouses, their significant others, their partners, whatever they have. That's going to be how they communicate with their child. Usually, it doesn't differ too much from what I've noticed. If you have somebody who's usually angry, they're going to be angry when they communicate with their child. If you have someone who's usually happy, they'll usually be happy with their child. But understanding that a 3-year-old isn't the same as a 15-year-old, and
Right.
you should talk to them like they're adult, but there should be boundaries on that. Swearing at a 3-year-old, screaming at a 3-year-old, it doesn't do too much. It scares them inside, and that's also what brings on this sense of shame as they get older. Being yelled at a certain age, it's not like if you're 20 years old, like you can kind of understand like, oh, that person's angry. But if you're getting
Right.
yelled at home and then you're getting yelled at 20, like that shouldn't be normal. That's not
Right.
a healthy way of going about it. So how to communicate, kind of the same thing I think we said before with patience and kindness. The patience is a big part of it. And if you go off the rails as the parent, it's starting to having to look at yourself and saying, what's wrong with me? Like, where am I messing up with my own executive functioning? Am I yelling at my son or daughter because we're late and I didn't know how to, I don't know, prepare properly? Is that why I'm angry and now I'm taking it out on my kids?
Right.
That's one example that I think of. Like when I was younger, my mom would get frantic, frustrated, and it's like, oh, like she wasn't really mad at me. Like I was probably not listening, right? I was probably jumping around, but that's not a reason to start yelling and screaming because I'm late.
Right, right. I know I have a friend, when she was young, she said her mom, no matter what, would always smile and say, "Have a great day," and kiss
Mhm.
them and make sure that when they left the house, they left a happy house. Because she told
Mhm.
them when they got older, "I did not want you to go to school being upset and sad.
Mm.
So no
That's
matter
nice.
what," yeah, she always said she kissed them, and made sure she's always smiling, and no matter what, they left the house with a good attitude because she wanted them to have a good day at school. I said, man, it ain't too many mamas like that.
So when I think of all this stuff, I have an uncle and an aunt that I was really close to. And my aunt, she knew how to work me. When I would throw a tantrum, she would know what to do, when to do it. She was patient. If I needed to go scream, or she would go let me do it and then come back. And she had this way of making me not feel bad for it. Versus my parents, they're more emotionally involved in it. So, it's difficult. It's not an easy thing, which is why you have to look at yourself first. You know,
Yes.
we all have, there's so many different ways that people have kids. Some do it intentionally, some unintentionally. Some people want their kids, and unfortunately, some people don't want their kids. So I always feel like when I talk about this, it's so broad. Like when you have a child that you really love, it's easy in some
Right.
ways. It can be frustrating, but if you have a child who has, special needs or is just really, really, rough around the edges and you just don't know how to communicate yourself, it makes it tough. It makes it really hard. So
Right.
there's no judgment there because I had both ends of it. I saw all sides of it growing up, but now seeing it with a different lens, with just a different side of it, I see these parents and I say, well, why don't you and I talk first a little bit and kind of see like what frustrates you? I
Right.
see a lot of kids and it's like the kid isn't ready for all this yet. They don't need to know all these terms and phrases. They need to see it from you first before you come to a professional. Like let's see what's going on with you first.
Yeah. Yeah. I get that because I believe that they always do what they see us doing, not what we
Mhm.
tell them to do.
Yeah.
Always. And I'm like, oh my, we gotta be really, really careful. Just like our, I don't know, what's his name? Simon Shaket said the mind doesn't understand don't and
Ooh.
no. So we have to start telling the kids, if you touch the stove,
Hmm.
you will get burned. If you run in the street, there's a possibility of you getting hit by a car. So I don't like for you to run toward the street because cars are, you got to rephrase it
Mm.
so that they get it. And my grandson also told me, he said, Grandma, if you, my mom and dad would have told me why, instead of just saying because I said so,
Hmm.
my life probably would have been so much easier.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I like that because I know that kids watch us. They don't do what we say more so than they watch what we do.
It's those if thens that you're talking about, and that
Yes.
it is true. It's the if thens and whys. My son is super curious. When we go to the grocery store, he looks at things, and my first instinct is like, don't touch everything, but
Right.
I also want him to be curious. I want him to experience things. So I had to change my mindset when I go out with him. Like we're
Hmm.
going on an adventure. We're not just going to the store. This is an
Right.
adventure. If I only have 5 minutes, well, then I'll let him know, hey, we're going in quick and we're coming back out. But I make
Hmm.
sure to give him that space where, if he sees things, he can ask me, pick them up, touch them as long as it's safe. And
Right.
if it's not, then it's an if then, which is difficult to do. And that's also
Yeah.
one of those things that, just saying that to a parent, say it this way, don't say it that way.
Yeah.
Like, don't tell me how to parent my kid. Well, obviously, yeah, no, I don't want to tell you how to parent your kid. Um, but I think if you are able to educate yourself in this area, it's
Hmm.
really helpful. It's really, really helpful.
Yeah. I watch the kids at when I'm at Somerset, and I watch the kids playing the fountain.
Hmm.
And the number of 3 years and under who don't want to leave that water. They've got their hands in there, they're splashing around, and they're just like soaking their hands in there and their arms stretched out. And parents say, okay, it's time to go. They're giving them 2 minutes. Oh man, you talking about falling out and arching their back so that they, can't walk right. They have to hold them and screaming.
Hmm.
And I'm like, wow, it would just it just seems like they've never been told no before in their lives.
So going back to executive functioning, that would be a good example of transitioning.
Hmm.
Being told, okay, we're going from one thing, which you're having fun doing, to
Right.
something where you don't know what you're going to do yet. That's a skill, no different than anything else. It's different, no different than if I tell you, all right, Miss Sarah, we're going to do this job here. And I'm
Hmm.
not going to tell you what we're going to do next, even though you love doing this. We're going to go do something else. Like, but I like this job.
Right.
Now imagine if you've never been told no before, or you're not used to being told no, or you're not even told, hey, we only have 2 minutes left. I'm just
Right.
gonna grab you and take you, and it's time to go. It's difficult. You're gonna get a response like that from anybody. What do you mean I gotta
Oh,
leave? I'm having a good time.
oh, they have a fit.
Yeah.
They have a fit, and I some of them know. Mama stretch her hand out, and say, "Let's go." They grab her hand and they walk away.
Hmm.
Others, the majority of them, they scream
Yeah.
and fall out, and when their moms try to pick them up and carry them, where they arch that back, and I'm
Hmm.
just like, wow. But
Yeah.
I didn't think about the fact that if they're at home and they get their way, they've never been told no at home. When you bring
Hmm.
them out in public, the same thing you do at home,
Hmm.
and that's why they do what they do.
It's not too different. You're right. Some parents say, "Hey, we're going out in public. You don't act like this in public." That's some parents. And then you have some parents who are just open. They're just like, okay, whatever it
Right.
is. And then they throw a fit, and maybe the parent's a little bit embarrassed.
Yes, a
Um,
lot embarrassed. Yeah,
yeah.
a lot. Yeah.
And I've noticed that some aren't, they're just used to it
Right.
at this point. So it's a lot of just, when I see that, I try not to throw judgment too harshly in there.
Yeah, it's hard.
I'm looking at it and I'm like, okay, well, I wonder what it's like at home. And I
Hmm.
wonder, how do they communicate with their kid? Or maybe this kid does have special needs, or maybe the parent is only like a one parent household and they don't have much help and it's difficult. Or
Right.
maybe the kid's just totally spoiled and the grandparents live there and they just always say yes. There's so many things that go into it.
Yes.
That's why I go to the executive functioning piece, where no matter what you have, whether it's good or bad, it's
Hmm.
a skill that can be learned over time. And I try to
Okay.
take that moral judgment out of it and look at, okay, this is a skill that this kid hasn't developed yet or hasn't
Mhm.
been taught. And it can be taught to pretty much anybody who's willing.
That's good. That's
Yeah.
good. Yeah. So we already said that parents need to sometimes ask themselves, do I need more patience? Do I need more education? Do I need more communication skills? How often do you think parents say that when they like take their kid out in public or take them to a friend's house and they just clown on them? Do they ever do self-examination, say, "Oh my God"?
Yeah,
Do you think
it's tough. It's really tough to do a self-examination on yourself because everyone thinks that they're just the way I am is the way I am and that's how I am. And that's a tough place to come from, where you don't want to try and better a situation if it is. I'm
right?
sure there's some parents out there who do think that way and their kids fall right in line. I would say they got lucky with their kid's personality, or they're
Yeah.
so dominant over them that the kid's scared, which that's really not what you want because that kid's going to grow up. Now, if like the way that I think about it is if my son grows up scared of his mom, and what that's going to look like when he starts dating women, of the kind of woman he's going to look for, because he's going to find some sense of comfort in that because that's what he's going to be used to. And I
Wow.
don't want him thinking that way. I want him to have a good, healthy communication, not where he's going to say no to his mom. Like, no, I'm not doing that, but a healthy way of understanding and listening. Like my wife's the boss. Like she says it and it happens.
Right.
More so because she's developed a relationship with him. She understands him. And like me, like I see myself in my son so much where when he starts acting up, I sometimes I tell her like, that's not what he needs. Let him go through it. And then he's going to be over it and it's okay. If she just starts screaming at him or yelling at him, or me, the same thing. If I start acting up, like she's got to remind me like, hey, he's just going through it. Like, let him
Right.
do it. And then when he comes back down, we breathe and we don't shame him. We don't get after him, but it comes down to us and how we deal with that. It's me seeing myself in him. That's the part that I don't like. I'm like, man, like I don't like that about me. And
Mm,
that's what I'm seeing. So it's frustrating me that I can't do anything about it.
that's funny.
Well, yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, so for a parent to self-examine themselves, it's like it's tough. Like you got to be open. You got to be really open, and it can't be while you're having kids that you're open. I mean, if it happens, then great. But along that process of growing up, which hopefully you have the chance to do before you have kids, if that's what your goal is, which was mine. That was my main one before I had kids. Make sure that I'm a grown up too.
Hmm.
Um, where can I be better? Which is everywhere. I can be better for all the executive functioning. That's just what I've seen in my practice, and that's what I see in everyday life, just working even at the bowling alley.
My daughter told me she had a little incident at work, and she told me her reaction.
Mm-hmm.
And I told her, I had a Bible study class,
Mm-hmm.
and we were going through this book, healthy, being emotionally healthy.
Okay.
And one of the things it talked about was DNA. And
Okay.
it said that, if you look back through your ancestors
Mm-hmm.
and you think about how your grandmother responded to stuff,
Mm-hmm.
great grandmother, great great grandmother, and I was like, wow. So they have a saying, they say, you didn't steal that.
Mm-hmm.
When your kids do something and, and people are shocked about it or they're shocked about it, And I always tell my daughter, I say, that's that DNA. I say, well, you didn't steal that behavior. It came from a long line
Yeah.
of women, that responded that way. Because, for instance, my mother and my aunts and my great grandmother, I was told, they did not run away from confrontation.
Mm-hmm.
So if you wrong them or their children, I know that my mom would go to another parent about their kids. I know that she would do that. And usually, if someone confronts me with something, I don't shy away from it. I address it.
Mm-hmm.
I have coworkers that would say, "Well, you know how she is, or you know how he is," so I don't say anything. And I was like, "That's how he is or she is with you.
Mm-hmm.
I don't get that same type." And if I did, I would address it.
Yeah.
I'm usually, I know they say you shouldn't, try to start stuff, but if you come to me with an attitude, I usually want to ask you why.
Right.
I want to know why, because it should happen one time only.
Sure. Yeah.
We should clear it up.
When you say that about the family, we were just going through this in our group process where we're talking about generations and how that it's passed down.
Hmm.
And for me, very similar. So I came from three generations Hungarian, and on the other side it was German, Irish, and Italian. So like I think I am the way I am because this is how I am. Like no, I learned this from many years.
Yes.
My father's side is extremely stoic. There was very little expression, very little external love given from this. Very tough, and traveling overseas and having nothing. It was we had to work hard and like figure this stuff out.
Hmm.
And then on my other side, it was a little bit more loving, but very very rough and tough. And I'm like, okay, like I see why I am the way I am. Like it's not because like I think I'm just this is how I was born. No, I learned a lot of this, and that shaped my personality that I have. But yeah, I am very conscious of that with my kids. That just never smiling, walking through the house, not talking, that'll create some stuff in you. So
Yes.
we try and be a little bit more open in my house with that, knowing that it came from somewhere.
Right. Yeah. Because I read about a couple. This young man, his mother, he was raised by his mom, him and his
Hmm.
brothers. She didn't hug, she didn't kiss,
Hmm.
she didn't show affection.
Yeah.
But she would always tell them, "You got a roof over your head, don't
Mm-hmm.
you? You got food, you got clothes on your back, don't you?" That was his way of showing. That's how he was taught love is.
Yeah.
His wife, on the other hand, had a dad and mom, two-parent home. Dad would buy her stuff,
Hmm.
but he also would hug her, sing to her, take her to the park. He spent time, he was more affectionate.
Yeah.
Tell her she was pretty, kiss
Hmm.
her, and stuff like that. And for whatever reason, her husband was not that same person. And so they got into it a lot.
Hmm.
And he was asking for advice. What should he do?
Oof.
And like you said, he learned that way. He said that's what his definition of love was,
Hmm.
coming from his mother.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
that can be a tough place to be when you're with somebody who has a totally opposite way, and no two people are going to take love the same. Because for that mom, that's what love was. That's what she
right.
was taught, and that was a big deal probably for his mom. Like look what I have to do to put this roof over your head to feed you. Like this isn't easy. I'm going out of my way. That gets passed down generationally. There's something that's missing or
Right.
lost, however you want to look at it. Um, and if you marry somebody who's the exact opposite, where they were doted on and loved and hugged and kissed, there's going to be a lot of friction.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
then the kids,
well,
because
and then the kids, which is something you want to try as we're talking about, parents and education. These are
right,
things you want to try and teach your kid. Like, hey, how did they grow up? How did their parents grow up?
right.
There seems to be some taboo about asking that question. Now, I don't know
Yes.
why. Let me meet I'd like to know their parents, or do you know their parents? What is their
Mhm.
history? Knowing your lineage and history is so important when you're dating, because all those things are still coming up, and I don't think that's taught the same. There's all these movies where it's oh, I love you and we'll be this way forever. I haven't seen that with anybody. So Yeah, for me, it was a big part of, hey, I'd like to know where you're from, and
Right.
what you really have, what your family's gone through, because that's who you are. That's part of what I believe.
Exactly. Yeah. I
Yeah.
like to recommend that young ladies not just look at the person, the young men, or either the men look at the young ladies. I want you to go to their family events.
Hmm.
I want you to go to Memorial Day when the family gets together, a graduation, some kind of celebration.
Hmm.
Because if you're planning on spending the rest of your life with this person,
Yeah.
and you go to their family and they like to fight, they like to
Hmm.
drink alcohol, they like to use other substances to
Hmm.
feel really really good. You're talking about having a child with this person, and one day you may want your child, I'm pretty sure if there's a grandma, she'll want her grandson or granddaughter to spend time with her.
Hmm.
Well, while he's over in that environment, what is he going to learn? He's
Yeah.
probably going to learn some profanity, learn how people drink and cuss each other out and get mad and stab each other or so I always say we need to know the DNA of the people that we're dating. Some of them will avoid being around their family if they realize how dysfunctional they are, because all
Hmm.
families are dysfunctional, but
Yeah.
there's different degrees of dysfunctionality.
Hmm.
And you got to realize how much he tolerates or she tolerates when they go around, when you take them around their family. How do they interact with them? Do they act like that's normal,
Hmm.
for somebody to just get up and slap another person, or snatch their food out, just anything that is
So that
not.
so let's take that back to executive functioning. That would be
Mhm.
something along the lines of impulse control. That's a skill that you learn over time, and you learn that probably in preschool. Hey, don't snatch that out of that other kid's hand. That's
Right.
an impulse that a kid wants to do that was never developed. And
Mm-hmm.
if that's what you see as adults, that's a skill that wasn't taught at a young age.
Right.
So who's going to teach that? Hopefully they're taught that over time, but clearly it's not for a lot of people, where they see something, they steal it because I just had to have it, or like it was so easy to take. That's
Right.
impulse control. Um, I hate to always put teachers as the ones who have to do it. I don't believe that's their role. I think it
Uh,
does have to come from a community of people, and that's something that, it's probably a different topic, but that's something that a lot of people have lost. And
mm-hmm.
even in some communities, that executive functioning part of it isn't quite there. Maybe it's there, they're a group, they're a unit, but if they're all fighting all the time and, like you said, like messing around, being rough, it can be tough growing up in that environment. And a child will never meet their full potential or have extreme difficulty meeting their full potential if that executive functioning piece isn't really helped. Now, there's
Right.
another part of that too, and we didn't really talk about it, but it's when certain levels of executive functioning are really high and others are really low. So let's call, like, maybe their organization is really high. It's really
Mm-hmm.
high in their level. Like maybe out of 10, maybe they're like an 8 or a 9. But that time management piece is really low for whatever reason. That gap in between, that's going to be
Mm-hmm.
real tough for them as they get older, where they know how to be organized and they want things clean in a certain way, but they only have a certain amount of time to do it. As,
Wow.
as parents, we're in a rush. We're always rushing, and it takes time to get kids ready. So how can you be organized and manage your time the way that you see fit? That's
Mm-hmm.
the difficulty that I see in my own life, my own relationship with my family, is how do we manage this time and be organized so we can be proficient in all the great things we want to do. And every
Right.
family is going to have a different answer to that. I know what I'm working on and how I'm trying to do it. The first thing is patience. I know I got to
Right.
be patient. Whew, if I'm not patient, everything's off. My wife's not patient, I can kind of reel her back in. But if I'm not patient, it can be tough.
Yeah. I went to church yesterday and there's a lady, she's a little older than me. She broke her arm.
Oh no.
And she said, all of these 60 plus years, I haven't had a broken bone, but I broke my arm. And I said, bro, you're rushing. She
Hmm.
said, yes. I was like,
Hmm.
that's why I don't rush.
Hmm.
I have tripped and did so many things rushing. My grandson, he did something. He hurt his knee or something. And I say, were you rushing? And he's like, yeah. I said, that's
Yeah.
why we don't rush.
Hmm.
This family, we don't rush because
Yeah.
rushing causes injuries. So don't rush.
Yeah, I mean,
So
you
don't
look at that, you take
rush.
that to, like, getting yourself in a car and you're rushing. I mean, you're maybe going to save a minute and a half, maybe a minute and a half, and chances are, if you're late, you're probably more than a minute and a half late. It all comes back to the executive functioning piece of just how your brain functions and operates when it comes to those things. Um, Impulse control is a big one, task initiation, organization. But I'm finding right now time management is like the key thing for everybody, how they manage their time. And people who manage their time well, they're typically doing okay. There's no one way to do it either. That's the greatest part.
Right.
You can find your own way, but it's really just like the awareness of it, of like, hey, this is a piece of skill that maybe I wasn't taught. And I know me personally, I was a terrible student. I was awful in high school, elementary school, middle school, all of them. I was terrible. I did not understand these concepts. And I probably wouldn't have, unless I had some one-on-one help from somebody, I would
Mhm.
never have gotten them unless I got into this field.
Wow.
Hmm.
Yeah. That's tough. Yeah.
It's
That's
tough for a lot of
tough.
kids because a
Yeah.
lot of the parents, what they do is they turn it into a moral thing. Like he just doesn't try hard enough, or he just doesn't care. And for me, I never not tried. I always tried hard, but
Right.
part of it's like my working memory, like how I hold information. I have a terrible job at holding information. That's why I have notes here. I can't hold
Mhm.
information very well. So like math for me was very difficult because I had to remember all the formulas and remembering all the
Right.
numbers, where they go. For me, that was difficult. Remembering definitions and things, that's tough for me.
Mhm.
Parents will say, oh, well, he's not trying hard enough or he's not studying long enough. And those things are probably true. Studying is another thing. That's a learned skill, how you study. And
Mm.
then being bad
Yeah.
at it also, like knowing like it's okay to be bad at it because you're progressing. That's where the patience also comes in, because it's really, really hard for a lot of these kids. And I feel so bad for them because I know what it feels like inside, going back to that shame of like maybe my friend is smarter than me, or maybe they have better executive functioning in an organization, or they know how to manage their time. That was something that wasn't taught to me at a young age. I knew what it
Right.
was, I knew it meant how to manage time, but I didn't know how to break it down into micro doses. And that's what I
Mm.
try to do now with my all my clients, all my kids. I try to like take that shame out of it and like say, hey, this is just a
Right.
formula. This we got to just break this down a little bit more and understand concepts and being aware of it. And once they're aware of it, I see like I don't think I'm going to be good at this yet, but I don't feel as bad about myself.
Right. Right. Now I have an issue with time management for sure.
Mhm.
But I tell people that like to call and say I'm running late, and I said, listen, 1 minute late is just as bad as 15 minutes late. Late is late. So
Mhm.
I'd rather you be tardy than absent. So
Mhm.
take your time getting here.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that, if you rush and get in an accident, 9 times out of 10, you won't be here at all.
That's
So
right.
take your time, because if you're 1 minute late, you're late.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's
15
like,
minutes, 30 minutes late is late.
yeah. No,
So
we're on the same page as that one for sure.
yeah,
That's
don't
something
rush.
I,
And I
Mhm.
used to have coworkers. They would get to work an hour in advance, an hour early,
Mhm.
but they leave an hour and a half early too. You get to
Mhm.
work early, but you leave early too. And I was like, you know better than me. If I'm 5 minutes late,
Mhm.
because you're stealing.
I got
You're
you.
supposed to stay
Yeah.
there the entire 8 hours, and then just because you get here, but you don't come here to work when you get here. You come here so you
Mhm.
can drink your coffee and read your paper.
I gotcha. Yeah, part of that, even at the bowling alley with stuff, and I try and throw this into like my management style of understanding. Yeah, when they're late, I'm just like, all right, like you're late, just get here when you can. Like,
Right.
don't rush, just get here. That's the same thing, and I know for them, like, cause when I'm at the bowling alley, I don't have my counseling hat on all the time, but I am aware of it. I can't turn it off. But I'm
Right.
looking at them and I'm watching them, saying, okay, where do they fall short in some of these executive functioning skills?
Mhm.
And I try and like pinpoint those areas for them and just talk to them about it. I don't try and teach them about it. I just talk to them about those things and how it affects me and my own life and what it does. And
Right.
that's really what it comes down to, because they weren't taught that, or they were not good at it yet. That's the big
Yeah.
thing, is that like for me, I get a lot of kids who work for me. It's their first job, and I can't judge them and say you're going to be a terrible employee the rest of your life. They're just not good at it yet. It hasn't clicked for them.
Right. I like
So
that.
yeah, that's what I try to do with them on that front of just, hey, like we're going to get there. You're going to get there eventually if you want to, if you want to be meet your
Right.
potential, whatever that may mean.
That's good. I like that. I like that word yet. Not
Yeah.
yet. Yeah, it doesn't it's not final. You're not the worst of the worst, but yeah. So when we're talking about parents knowing their child's behavior and what's normal and all of that stuff, how important do you think praising and showing affection is to children?
I think praise and affection are two very different things. I don't
Okay.
think a child should constantly be told how great they are.
Okay.
That's something I think that can be built into, like, when you talk about confidence.
Mm-hmm.
If I tell my son how great he is for doing nothing, then he's going to have a sense of entitlement just because he thinks he's great. When my
Right.
son performs well at something and he does something, it's gonna be real. Like, wow, like you did that. Not I'm
Right.
so proud of you. You did that, and you should feel proud of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Me praising him and telling him how much I love him, I feel like I do that in other ways. It's gonna be how
Okay.
much time we spend together. It's gonna be how much we play together. When he's 3 years old, I could tell him I love you, I love you, I love you. That's not what he doesn't know he doesn't know what love means. What
No.
he sees is the time I give him. What he sees is how we talk to each other, the adventures we go on. That's what he sees. So the praise, I'm not a big believer in, like, you need to praise your kid this much. It's how you do it and when you do it. You should always tell your kids you love you. I love you. I think that's something that I have learned, and because I'm expressing myself to him, that's how I'm expressing my love, is telling him I love him, and the joy he brings to me. He doesn't know what that means yet, but as he grows
Right.
older, he will start understanding those concepts. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, the praise aspect of it, we have a big, big problem, I think, in our country of entitlement, where
Mm-hmm.
people think they should either just be given stuff, or they should be told that they're the best, or they shouldn't be told that they did wrong. And I don't agree.
Yes.
I don't agree with that concept. I think that
Mm-hmm.
when you do well at something, you should be rewarded. And when you do poorly at something, you should be told what you did wrong so you could do it better. And I
Yeah.
get a lot of people in the bowling world, and I get a lot of people who come into me from the counseling world, where they're not used to that friction. And I think friction
Mm-hmm.
is a good thing. And it's not to be aggressive or to be angry at somebody. That's not what I mean. It's just more of a, like, it's okay to be told you're not doing this properly, and you shouldn't take offense to it. Once again, you kind of have to look at yourself and say, like, where's that coming from where I feel offense to it? And
Right.
in the moment, if you're dealing with a person like that, it's very difficult. Very, very difficult.
Yeah, yeah. That's really. I thought about. I guess when the last 15 years,
Mhm.
when you have a little league team or something,
Yeah.
you have the most valuable player you have, but all of them get trophies,
Hmm.
but they stink.
Yeah.
The kids stink. They're not any good. But some parents said we don't want them to feel bad, so we're giving everybody on the team a trophy. They don't
Mhm.
deserve it.
Yeah.
But so that they won't feel bad, they they reward bad behavior.
Hmm.
And I
It,
think that's
yeah.
what you're saying about praising them stuff. I don't think we should do that.
Yeah. So, like, I'll give you an example of how, sometimes when I do praise my son for not doing anything at nighttime, we do affirmations. And I tell him all the things that I see in him that are great. I think he's strong. I think he's kind. I think he's funny. I think he is thoughtful towards his sister. Those are the things I praise him for, those things that I see.
Okay.
And I think that over time, that one little, it takes 10 seconds, and we do it every night, or mostly every night when I'm home. That's enough praise, I think, to tell him. And, when we talk, we talk, what do you like about yourself? It's not about what I like about him. It doesn't matter it shouldn't matter what I like about him. What do you like about yourself? Where does that's how you build confidence.
Right.
So we did this a couple days ago, and I said, well, what do you like about yourself? And he kind of paused, and he didn't know. It was the first time we had done this.
Hmm.
I'm like, and my wife was like, well, Dad, why don't you go first? So I said, okay, I'll go first. I'm like, I like how strong I am and how smart I am. And my son says, I like that I work hard at things, and I like that I'm kind. And I was like, holy crap. Like the first one, I didn't think he was, I've never told him that he works hard at things. I was like, wow,
Right.
like, that's awesome. Like that was a good one. And I was like, I was, that was great. That means we're doing something right so far. He's only
Yeah.
3. So like we've got many more years to go. But from at this level, from 0 to 3, it's like, okay, let him start doing it now. I don't need to do it for him. I think he's got it.
Right.
Even at 3 years of age, he is starting to understand these concepts. I'm hoping we can keep that going until he's, forever.
Right.
Really.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things I asked one of the dads, if he could have a day to teach a class to young ladies, what would he teach? And he said self confidence.
Mm-hmm.
He would teach them self confidence because he said he thinks it's funny that they get on social media, tell their business, and then they say stay out of my business. If they're not doing that, they post like 10 billion selfies,
Mm-hmm.
want everybody to like them, you know.
Yeah.
And I was like, maybe it is something to do with self esteem because why
Yeah.
would you just, and from what I've been told, to get the perfect picture, you have to do at least 75 of them, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and then you post the 120th one or, or whatever. But yeah, I guess if we start when they're young and just letting them say, what they like about themselves, because like you said, it doesn't matter what anybody outside of you thinks, it's what you think about yourself. And
Yeah.
in that way, we can get into the real confidence and not have to worry about people pleasing.
Mm,
If we have to look on the outside for approval,
yeah.
then we end up with all these people pleasers that don't have a clue about themselves, and they end up marrying somebody that they're trying to please, and then they end up miserable or getting a
Mm-hmm.
divorce because they never took the time to do a self-evaluation and make sure that they were okay with themselves and not worry about that other person.
Yeah, I see
So
so many people who come into to the clinical side of things, clients, patients, whatever you want to call them, who I can see their potential. I can see it. It's very clear to me, and it's no BS. Like I can see that
okay.
they really have true skills, but they don't see it yet. And
Right.
for some of these kids, they're in. I see a 16-year-old. A 16-year-old is going to be different than a 24-year-old who still doesn't see their potential. The 16-year-old can still be molded a little bit. They can still be developed for them to start to see it. At 24, if they've already gotten into some trouble, if they have kids and whatnot, it's going to be a lot more difficult for them to really get to that level.
Right.
Um, so yeah, it's that potential they have to see in themselves and just start saying, okay, where are my strengths? Where are my weaknesses? Where is my executive functioning, strong and weak? All these things. But a
Hmm.
lot of these kids go through life and they become adults and they just think like I'm stupid or I'm dumb or I'm not good at this. And it's not that.
Right.
It was never brought to their attention what this actually was. It's not that they're lazy. It's not that they're
Right.
dumb. It's that they have deficiencies in some of these really important areas of their lives. And I tell all parents, everybody, like start looking this stuff up. When I started working for the practice I work for now, I was blown away. I was like, this makes sense. This is why I was the way I was. And it was why I was, not why what someone did to me.
Right. Right.
I saw it for myself and I was like, this makes so much sense. So now I'm 38 years old and like now it's starting to click for me. And I'm
Hmm.
like, okay, well, this makes sense. So I need to start preparing this way here. If I have a tough or a working memory that doesn't work the way I need to make more notes for myself when I'm going into some kind of meeting or something. So I'm prepared. At
Right.
16 years old, if I would have known that it was not a moral issue, that I wasn't dumb or stupid or slow or just not as smart as my friends,
Hmm.
I mean, it could have been a lot different for me, I think.
Right. Much better childhood. Much better
It could have
childhood.
been different, that's for sure. I had a pretty good childhood, but the school aspect would have been a lot
Yes.
it would have been
The
less stressful
educational.
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
for me, I always go back to the school part because that's what was most difficult for me. But for some people, school is easy for them, and it goes into like you were saying, relationships, where relationships are hard because they're dating
Right.
people who have poor executive functioning. They have poor impulse control. It goes into all areas of your life. It's not just for
Right.
school. It goes into everything. It's your whole entire life.
Right. Just like you said, if I'm angry at home, I'm going to go to work and I'm going to be angry.
Mhm. Yeah.
It's not a switch you can turn on and off,
Hmm.
how you interact. And that's another thing, the social skills, how to be able to socialize. How can
Hmm.
we teach our kids, how to socialize better?
Yeah.
And I guess it's how we talk to one another.
Well, they're definitely going to see it and they're going to mimic you because, I mean,
Right.
a 3-year-old to a 5-year-old, I mean, even to a 20-year-old, your parents, whether you like them or not, are still your examples. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what I think a lot of people don't really understand that, you know, with like the social aspect of things. Like if you want your kids to be social, well then you need to
Mm-hmm.
talk also. You know, you need to put
Right.
them in situations where you're talking. They need to watch you talk. And if you want your kids to be funny, you have to be trying to be funny. You know, like dad jokes don't start when you're a dad. They actually start much younger. You know,
Right.
that's what I'm noticing right now. My son cracks me up with dad jokes all the time.
So, how often do you think we need to stop and listen to our children?
Oh man. Well, I feel like I'm aware of it, so I'm always trying to listen to it. When they're throwing a tantrum, it's not that they're throwing a tantrum over whatever they're throwing a tantrum over. There's probably more to it. It could be they're tired.
Mhm.
That's a big part of
Right.
it. You know, when do they get their nap? Are they thirsty? Are they hungry? It's learning to use those, I guess, parent skills once you get to a certain point of understanding kids, which I
Mhm.
don't all the way understand my son. There's still a lot of surprises, I'm sure, for me. But I think about myself. What would I want in this situation? When I'm angry and upset, I want to be left alone. Don't come to me. Don't talk to me. Let me have like some time. And if I go
Right.
keep running to my son, I'm not listening to him when he's running away. If he's safe,
Mhm.
I'm gonna let him have his time. He's gonna calm down eventually, and then we'll
Right.
talk about it, or we won't talk about it at that moment,
Mhm.
and we'll kind of just move on from there. So the listening kind of just it's I'm listening to myself and trying to remember how I was when I was that age and what it was like for me when people would push and push and push. Like I don't like being pushed like that. I'll just stay mad.
Mm. Yeah, I think. Well, I think that when we get angry, um, when we're in a relationship, we get angry. I think a couple of hours is good enough for you to try to cool down.
Hmm.
But this idea of people giving you the silent treatment,
Mm.
I'm a talker. The silent, the silent treatment is the worst for me. I do not
Yeah.
like silent treatment. I'm so used to just saying, okay, now you've thought about it. You've had 2 hours to think about it. Let's talk about it.
Well, I'll
But
tell you right now, the silent treatment is a power move. It is a major power move. It is a manipulation move, and it works on everybody. So don't think you're the only one who doesn't like it. It's just how long you can last taking it. It is
mhm,
it's dirty pool when someone's giving the silent treatment for longer than a couple of hours. Some people can't take it for longer than a couple of minutes, let alone a
mhm,
couple of hours, days, months, years for some people. So
right.
yeah, it is a definite power move, and that's something that's I think taught at a young age. How do you express yourself when you're angry? Are you able to monitor yourself and what's
Mhm,
happening, and do you realize what you're doing to somebody else? That's
right.
also a part of that executive functioning. So yeah, you being a talker and wanting to work it out and figure it out so you can move on, I'd say
Mhm,
that's a great personality trait that you have. And if you were with somebody who wasn't that way, it'd be tough. It'd be really, really tough.
mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. It look, it was. So how do you make your baby, your child feel important when they are talking to you? You know how sometimes they'll get distracted while they're talking. They playing with Dad, I did, and then and then they'll start watching you like, I'm. What do you tell them to get them refocused back to you
Oh
because they want
man.
to talk to you, they want to sit next to you, they want to have your time, but you got the TV on and you're sitting on the couch next to each other and they start to tell you something and then they get distracted. So
Well, the distracting part probably comes from me. I'm more distracted than my son probably is, and that's probably because of the phones that we all carry around with us. That's something that I'm working on myself, of just not having that thing. But I probably do have an addiction to my phone of just doom scrolling all day. So, um, you have to be aware of it. And I don't want I'm waiting for the day. It's probably going to happen where my son says, well, dad's looking at his phone. And I'm just gonna be
Mhm.
like, oh man, he got me. Like I can't do it anymore. Probably now I could probably get away with it. Um,
Mhm.
so it's just knowing that this time's short. That's really the only thing for me
Right.
that gets me like, okay, I'm going to put it down. This is going to go by so fast. I know it. Everybody says
Yes.
it. And I already hate that he's 3 years old. I wish he was one, but I love that he's three and he's going to be four. So that's really what it is for me. I'm trying to really just savor every moment of it. And even when I try to savor it, it's not enough.
Mm.
So that's the motivation enough for me, is that someday he's not going to want to spend time with me. Everybody tells me that also. And if I'm
Yeah.
doing a good job with a dad, maybe he'll want to spend time with me sometimes. So
Okay.
that's kind of where I had to go with the attention. I haven't had that where he's not paying attention so far. My son, when he wants to play or talk to me, if my phone's not with me, I'm listening. I want to hear what he has to say. I want to see how far his development has gotten. Every day it's something new. He's learning more and more every day. So I'm aware of it. Um, I don't know if all people are, but I try to keep that phone. If the phone's away, I'm good, no problem.
Mhm.
But if that
Okay.
phone's in reach, I may just be like, what's going on in the world today?
Okay. All right, everybody. We're going to take a quick break, 60 seconds, and stay tuned. We will be right back to Real Dad Speak with Justin Roth. Don't go anywhere.
If you're enjoying this talk on executive functioning and you want to learn a little bit more for child development, please buy The Good Bowler, a book that I wrote on sportsmanship, and it talks about executive functioning. You can buy it on Amazon. Just type in The Good Bowler by Justin Roth. You can buy it on any Amazon, Barnes and Noble website, and bookbaby.com.
Welcome back, everybody, to Real Dad Speak. We're talking with Justin Roth, and we're talking about parents' role in their child development with executive functioning. And right now, we've come to the final five where I ask a question or fill in the blank. So, Justin, number one, what's the most important part of childhood? Do you think? What's the most important part of childhood?
The most important part.
Yeah,
Hmm. I would hope that my first thought was just enjoyment. I think like
good.
when you're a child, you should enjoy it. That should be the memory that you really just look back on fondly. So that's my answer to that one. I think enjoyment.
Okay, when do you think children should be given tasks to complete?
Right away, as soon as they can. 2 years old, 1.5 years old, even if it's just putting the blocks away. I think it is a great skill uh, that can start to be developed right away, that they can learn responsibility. So as soon as they can, you should start letting them do stuff. That's probably one of the hardest things I've noticed for parents to do, is let them do things, let them tie their
Mm-hmm.
shoes, put them on properly. Yeah, right away. Absolutely.
I like that. Should parents all oh number three, should parents always start their conversation with open-ended questions? Why or why not?
Why or
Like
why not?
tell me what yeah, like tell me what happened, or tell me how you feel, or
Well,
can you sit and talk
It's
as
age. It's age.
opposed
Yeah, I got you. It's age appropriate. I think when they're 2 years
okay.
old, 3 years old, you have to help them with some of those feelings that they're not
Mm-hmm.
feeling. That's honestly where some of the frustration comes from. Is they don't know how to say what they want to say, so they just start screaming and crying. So helping them filling in those blanks at an early age is important. As they get older, you can give them a little bit more opportunity to
Mm-hmm.
explain themselves, kind of based on what's going on. But yeah, from an early age, you can kind of explain to them the basic feelings, of angry, frustrated, joyful, happy, sad, those types of things.
Okay. Number four, this is a fill in the blank. It's important for parents to watch their children's behavior around adults or other children because blank.
Uh, should watch. Well, I was going to
Yeah.
say, because eventually they're going to be a part of society also.
Mm.
So knowing how to act right in different situations is important. Parents aren't always going to be around to save them. If your parents are around, they're probably going to save your butt, but at some point they're not. So at some point you're trying to get your kids ready to be on their own, whether that's at 13 or 18 or 27.
Okay. And number five, and the last question: if children have to start relearning something like tying their shoes or brushing their teeth, what should parents do, or who should they call to help them with this skill
Well, when you say
or
relearn, like I think of like
activity?
physical therapy.
Okay.
Physical therapists, if there's ever like a real like physical injury,
Hmm.
if something like that happens, then seek medical attention. What we do at our practice is we teach executive functioning. We teach these things as skills, and let the kids do it themselves. Don't
Hmm.
help them. They need to learn how to do it themselves, especially if they have deficiencies. Obviously, there has to be a desire. That's a big part of it. But don't rush in to play hero. It's in a lot of situations that's really only hurting your kids.
Yeah, because I'm thinking like if they're tying their shoes for a week, and then all of a sudden they try to tie it and it doesn't tie, the knot comes out, and I can't do it. I can't do it. What should we do?
Well, can't is a four-letter word. We never say
Right.
can't. In my house, can't is not a word we can use. So I'm having trouble
Okay.
doing this. Is kind of how we're teaching it, because you can do it. You can do pretty much anything. That's one of the major things we're teaching our kids right now. Uh, you can show them on your shoe, and if they need help, you can show them and you can guide them. Uh, Try and have patience. That's a big part of it. If you're in a rush, well, maybe you got to tie that shoe and get the show on the road. But for the most part, you should let them do it, re-show them again, and eventually they're going to get it. They will.
Yeah. Well, thank you, sir. That was very informative. I appreciate you taking your time to come on and help us out with our executive development with our children and
Yeah,
ourselves.
definitely ourselves. Well, I appreciate you having me back, and I hope I can come back another time.
Oh, you will. You will. You will. Well, thank you everyone for watching Real Dad Speak. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And don't forget the Shorelane's bowling is on 13 in Harper in St. Clair Shores. So make sure you stop by. It's a nice, nice bowling center with an arcade, food. What else do you have in there?
Arcade,
Birthday party.
food, bowling, birthday parties, group outings,
Perfect.
fundraisers. And then if they're interested in buying a great book on sportsmanship and executive functioning, they can buy The Good Bowler on Amazon.
There you go. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Justin.
Thanks.